There are questions that shake the very core of how we look at the Marvel Universe. What if the greatest villain and the greatest hero were the same person? What if the man who built the armor to save the world was also destined to wear the mask of doom that would enslave it? What if all the battles, all the sacrifices, and even the very laws of time itself were orchestrated not by Thanos, not by Kang, but by someone we never dared to suspect? Here's the question I want you to really think about. When Doctor Strange looked through 14 million possible futures, what did he actually see? Did he really see Tony Stark die as Iron Man? Or did he see Tony Stark live as something else entirely? Something darker, something inevitable. This isn't just another fan theory. This is a story, one that winds through the cracks of time, through the lies of the TVA, through the hidden destiny of the Avengers, and ultimately lands us face to face with a horrifying possibility. Doom is not just coming. Doom has always been here. Act 1 begins not with Doom himself, but with a simple detail, a birth date. Something so small that most people would dismiss it as nothing. But what if that date, the one Victor Von Doom carried through his life, wasn't just his? What if that date lined up perfectly with another genius, another titan of intellect and ego? A man who was born in the wrong time, in the wrong place, but whose life was shaped by fate into someone we all thought we knew. Tony Stark. Think about it. Tony was a man obsessed with control, obsessed with building the future with his own hands. But destiny, no matter how much tech you wrap around it, has a way of pushing through. The theory suggests that Tony wasn't just a Stark. He was a Doom. Not by name, not by nationality, but by birthright. That his story was always entangled with Victor Von Doom's story. That his very blood carried that shadow. And that would explain so much. Why Tony, among all the Avengers, was the one to crack time travel. Why he was the one who found the perfect solution when the brightest minds of the universe couldn't. Because he wasn't just pulling equations out of thin air, he was tapping into a destiny that had already been written. Now here's where it gets even stranger. We know Tony tested time travel the night Scott Lang came back from the quantum realm. We know he stayed up late, pushed his tech to the edge, and cracked the impossible. But what if he didn't just test the model? What if he jumped ahead, even for just a second? What if, in that instant, he didn't just see the future of the Avengers, he saw his future, saw the mask, saw the throne, saw the truth, that the universe had been hiding from him his entire life. Imagine that. You're Tony Stark. You build a time machine. You turn it on and, for one flicker of existence, you see not your armor, but Doom's armor. And you realize that no matter how many victories you claim, no matter how many times you outthink gods and titans, the one enemy you can't beat is yourself. But here's the terrifying part. That moment doesn't break him. It completes him. Because Tony was always teetering on the edge of arrogance and altruism. He built Ultron because he thought he could save the world his way. He built the suits because he couldn't trust anyone else to protect him. And in the end, when faced with the choice between death as a hero or survival as something darker, the Tony who saw his destiny may have chosen survival. That's where the Doom identity begins to take shape. The mask isn't just Victor Von Doom's legacy. It's Tony's rebirth. A Tony Stark who survives the snap, not by miracle, but by choice. A Tony who decides, in the silence after the battle, to step away, not into death, but into something far more dangerous. And here's where the stones come into play. Doom doesn't just gather Infinity Stones. He gathers people who are stones. Franklin Richards, the Soul Stone. Wanda, the Reality Stone. Galactus, embodying power. The Sentry, the Mind. Loki, as time. America Chavez, the Space Stone. Each of them, not just a weapon, but a living, breathing fragment of the multiverse's most dangerous puzzle. And who better to see the pattern and put it together than Tony Stark, the man who once aligned 6 stones into a single glove with nothing more than wires, nanotech, and sheer willpower. This new Doom doesn't need a gauntlet. He builds a team. But let's pause here, because the theory doesn't just stop at Tony becoming Doom. It goes deeper, tying into King, tying into the TVA, and tying into the very idea that Strange's 14 million futures were a fabrication, a lie. Think about that scene again. Strange sitting there, head twitching, seeing future after future. The story we were told is that he only found one where they went. But the theory suggests something more sinister. That he saw Tony not dying but transforming. That the reason Strange gave up the Time Stone wasn't just to buy time. It was to surrender to inevitability. To let the one path unfold that didn't end in annihilation. The one path where survival existed. But survival, not for the Avengers. Survival for Doom. And maybe that's why the TVA exists in the first place. To keep that timeline under wraps. To make sure no one realized that the sacred timeline wasn't about protecting order, but about protecting Doom's rise. Kang, with all his knowledge of time, all his paranoia about multiversal collapse, would have had every reason to manipulate that outcome, to push Tony into his destiny, to ensure that when the dust settled, the man who could challenge Kang wasn't a Stark anymore. He was Doom. The TVA tech, the pruning, the lies, they were all just scaffolding. And Doom, being who he is, doesn't just accept the cage. He takes the throne. He rips the tech from King's hands, rips the throne from Loki's seat, and declares himself not just ruler of one timeline, but of all timelines. Now let's circle back to the stones again, because this is where Act 1 really begins to unravel into something terrifying. Each person Doom recruits isn't random. They're chosen. Franklin Richards as the Soul Stone is a direct attack on the very foundation of life itself. Wanda as reality? She's the embodiment of rewrite it until it fits. Galactus doesn't just hold power, he is power. And Sentry, whose fractured mind mirrors the Mind Stone's infinite duality, is the perfect reflection of Tony himself. Loki, the trickster with time, represents the slipperiness of fate. And America Chavez? She's the door. The one piece that makes the whole board accessible. Doom doesn't need to hold these stones. He needs to command them. Because while Thanos sought power in objects, Doom understands the deeper truth. Power lies in people. And this is where Act 1 leaves us, standing at the precipice of something far bigger than Endgame, far darker than the Infinity Saga. Because if this theory is true, then everything we thought we understood, the victories, the losses, the sacrifices, were all just stepping stones. Not to save the universe, but to build Doom's universe. The question is no longer whether Doom is coming. The question is whether Doom has already been here all along. So where do we go from here? If Act 1 was the setup, the seed of a terrifying idea that Tony Stark didn't die but transformed into something far more dangerous, then Act 2 is where that seed begins to bloom. This is where we peel back the layers of the lie we've been told, where the puzzle pieces that once seemed random suddenly click into place. Because here's the truth. Doom's story is not just about him. It's about the architecture of the entire Marvel multiverse. And the deeper you dig, the more it becomes clear that every event we've witnessed, every choice our heroes thought they made wasn't theirs at all. It was orchestrated, curated, pruned. Let's start with Strange. Everyone remembers the scene on Titan. Strange, trembling, flickering through futures, whispering that haunting number, 14 million. But the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. Out of millions of futures, only one path exists where they win. Only one. That doesn't line up with Strange's abilities, his knowledge, his training. Strange isn't just a tourist of time. He is the sorcerer supreme. If anyone could bend the odds, multiply the possibilities, it was him. So why was there only one? Because it wasn't about winning. It was about shaping. What Strange saw wasn't a landscape of futures. It was a funnel. A narrow tunnel carved into the multiverse by Kang and reinforced by the TVA. Strange wasn't exploring infinity. He was being shown a curated slideshow. And in every slide, the face of destiny was the same. Doom. Now imagine what that does to Strange. Imagine watching millions of permutations and realizing with creeping horror that none of them end the way you hoped. Not with Tony dying a martyr. Not with the Avengers rebuilding a world of peace. No. They all end with Tony surviving, not as Iron Man, but as Doom. And Strange, bound by his oath, bound by his need to protect reality at any cost, has to play along. He has to feed Tony the illusion of heroism. He has to give Thanos the stone. He has to buy time for inevitability. Because the truth was never, we win. The truth was he becomes. Now, if that's true, then the TVA's role begins to make horrifying sense. Remember how Mobius described the sacred timeline? A single clean line, trimmed of all branches, all chaos. But ask yourself, who benefits from a single line? Not the people living inside it. Not the Avengers. No, the one who benefits is the one at the end of that line. Doom. The TVA's job was never to maintain peace. It was to prune every possibility where Tony didn't become Doom. To slice away the universes where he died, or retired, or passed the mantle. To ensure that every road led to the same throne. And Kang? He wasn't the enemy. He was the shepherd. He wasn't preventing Doom. He was preparing him. Remember, Kang is obsessed with control, with ruling the multiverse before it unravels into chaos. But what if Kang knew deep in the core of his being, that the only person who could truly control it wasn't him at all? That the only man whose intellect, arrogance, and willpower could cage infinity itself was Doom? That's why Kang played his games. That's why the TVA existed. Not to stop Doom, but to forge him. But here's the twist. Doom isn't content to be anyone's puppet. Think about Tony's entire character arc. Every time someone tried to control him, he rebelled. His father's expectations, rejected. The government's Sokovia Accords, rejected. Even Thanos' inevitable philosophy, rejected. Tony never played well under someone else's thumb. And that streak doesn't vanish when he becomes Doom. If anything, it intensifies. So picture this. Kang spends lifetimes grooming the timeline, pruning branches, ensuring Doom's rise. The TVA hunts down every variant that doesn't align. And then, at the moment Kang believes he has his perfect heir, Doom takes everything from him. The tech, the throne, the timeline. Because Doom doesn't inherit destiny. Doom steals it. And what's the first thing Doom does with this stolen power? He builds a team. Now let's return to those living stones. Franklin Richards as soul. Wanda as reality. Galactus as power. Sentry as mind. Loki as time. America Chavez as space. When you look at them individually, they're titans in their own right. But when you see them as pieces of Doom's design, the picture shifts. Franklin Richards, the child who can create universes with a thought, embodies the Soul Stone. Why? Because he is innocence corrupted. He is creation weaponized. Under Doom, Franklin isn't a boy. He's a reservoir of life itself, twisted into a tool. Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, is the Reality Stone. Her chaos magic doesn't bend reality. It rewrites it. She is Doom's quill, the ink with which he redraws the laws of existence. Galactus, a cosmic constant, a devourer of worlds. He doesn't represent the Power Stone. He is the Power Stone. In Doom's hands, Galactus isn't a predator. He's a battery, an endless source of fuel. Sentry, The Golden Guardian fractured by his own mind is the Mind Stone. His duality, his instability mirrors the stone's infinite intelligence and fragility. Sentry isn't just a weapon. He's a reflection of Doom himself. Brilliant, broken, unstoppable. Loki, the god of mischief, holds time. Not just because of his own dabbling, but because Loki embodies the slipperiness of fate. He is the living paradox. He dies, yet returns. He loses, yet rules. Doom doesn't just recruit him. Doom claims him. Because what better way to master time than to hold its trickster in chains, or worse, in partnership? And then America Chavez, the Space Stone. Her very body is the map of the multiverse. She can punch open doors to anywhere, anytime. She isn't a recruit. She's the key. Now here's the terrifying realization. Doom doesn't gather these people out of friendship or alliance. He doesn't need loyalty. He needs embodiment. Each one is a stone, living and breathing, brought under his control not to wield, but to be wielded. Doom isn't Thanos snapping a gauntlet. He's something worse. He's orchestrating a living symphony of infinity. And when you see it that way, you begin to realize Thanos was just the rehearsal. The true performance was always Doom. But Act 2 doesn't stop there. Because remember, this isn't just about assembling power. It's about rewriting the story we thought we knew. Think back to Endgame. Tony's snap. The sacrifice. The line we all remember. I am Iron Man. But here's the crack in the narrative. We see him fade. We see the funeral. We see the closure. But what if that wasn't the end? What if what we saw wasn't death but metamorphosis? Because here's a secret the TVA never wanted revealed. The sacred timeline doesn't erase. It edits. The branches don't vanish. They're redirected. And when Tony died, what if that moment was actually a branch, pruned and tucked away, only to resurface as Doom? That would explain the off-birth date, the misalignment, that eerie detail you can't shake. Tony's birthday lining up with Victor Von Doom's, almost as if the two weren't separate men, but echoes of the same destiny. Variants not of circumstance, but of identity. And then there's the mask. Doom's mask. Why is it so iconic? Why does it resonate through every telling, every version of his legend? Because it isn't just Victor's face. It's Tony's. Burned, scarred, reshaped not by accident, but by choice. Because to become Doom, Tony has to bury Iron Man. And nothing buries a man faster than fire and metal. So now we arrive at the precipice of Act 2's climax. Doom has risen. The TVA lies in ruins, its tech cannibalized into his arsenal. Kang's schemes have collapsed, his empire stolen by the very man he groomed. The Avengers are scattered, broken, their victories revealed as illusions. And the multiverse trembles, not at the thought of annihilation, but at the realization that survival now comes with a cost. Because Doom doesn't want balance, like Thanos. He doesn't want control, like Kang. He wants permanence. He wants to reshape reality not into order or chaos, but into himself. A multiverse where every path, every branch, every possibility bends toward Doom. And if Strange, Wanda, Loki, America, if all of them were just stepping stones in that journey, then what hope is left? That's the question Act 2 leaves us with. Not, can Doom be stopped, but was he ever meant to be? Because if Tony Stark, the man we cheered for, the man who snapped his fingers and saved the universe, was always destined to remove the mask of Iron Man and reveal the face of Doom underneath, then the story we've been watching all along wasn't the saga of heroes. It was the origin story of the greatest villain the multiverse has ever known. Act 2 left us staring into the abyss. The mask has been lifted. Tony Stark isn't gone. He's been reborn as Doom. A Doom who doesn't just wield power, but embodies inevitability. The TVA lies shattered. Kang has been dethroned. The Avengers have unknowingly built their greatest enemy with their own hands. And yet this story isn't finished. Because Act 3 is where the full scope of Doom's rise is revealed, not just as a man, not just as a tyrant, but as the architect of all reality itself. The question that lingers is simple. What happens when a man like Tony Stark, who once fought to protect a single world, decides that the entire multiverse is his to command? Let's start here. Doom's philosophy is different from Thanos's and Kang's. Thanos believed in balance. Half-life gone, half-life spared. The universe restored to a twisted sense of equilibrium. Kang believed in order. One timeline, one clean line, one ruler holding the reins of eternity. But Doom? Doom believes in permanence. He believes in a reality that cannot be undone. A reality that cannot collapse, branch, or fracture. A reality that, at its very foundation, reflects him. And that's the chilling heart of this theory. Doom doesn't just conquer worlds. He rewrites the concept of worlds. He doesn't just bend timelines. He cages them. He doesn't just seek victory. He erases the possibility of loss. Now, how does he do it? That's where his living stones come into play. Each member of his team is not just a weapon, not just an ally, but a fragment of infinity itself. With Franklin Richards bound as the Soul Stone, Doom controls the spark of existence. With Wanda reshaping reality, no truth can exist unless Doom allows it. With Galactus fueling him as power incarnate, he cannot be stopped by armies or gods. With Sentry's fractured mind as the Mind Stone, Doom can peer into thought itself, bending will as easily as circuits. Loki grants him the slipperiness of time, looping, resetting, twisting destiny at will. And America Chavez, the Space Stone, makes every door, every wall, every boundary meaningless. Together, they are not a team. They are a gauntlet made flesh, a living infinity gauntlet under the control of a single will. And here's where things get truly terrifying. Doom doesn't need to snap. He doesn't need to channel unbearable energy through his body. He doesn't need to risk it. He simply directs. With his team, he can remake the multiverse in an instant, not with a gesture, but with a word. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, but surely someone can stop him. Surely Strange or Wanda or Loki themselves could resist. Think again. Because Strange has already played his part. His so-called sacrifice on Titan wasn't to save the Avengers, it was to allow Doom's path. Wanda? Her grief and her rage made her pliable. Doom doesn't need to fight her. He simply gives her what she wants. Her children, her family, her reality. Rewritten and real. Loki? Doom doesn't chain him. He seduces him. Because if anyone understands the hunger for the throne, it's Loki. And when faced with Doom's promise of permanence, even Loki's mischief finds a ceiling. This is what makes Doom unstoppable. He doesn't conquer by brute force alone. He conquers by giving his enemies exactly what they think they want until they realize too late that what they've been given isn't freedom. It's chains made of gold. But let's step back. How did we not see this coming? How did the Avengers, how did Strange, how did the audience miss the signs? The answer lies in the greatest illusion of them all. Tony Stark's death. We mourned him. We honored him. We believed we saw the end of Iron Man. But the TVA, King, and the sacred timeline ensured that what we saw was only a fragment. Tony's story didn't end with, I am Iron Man. It continued with something far darker. I am Doom. The funeral, the hologram message to Morgan, the closure we felt, what if those were edits? Manufactured moments trimmed into the sacred timeline to maintain the illusion of heroism, while in the shadows, Doom was born? This changes everything. It reframes the entire Infinity Saga, not as a story of victory, but as a prologue, a prelude. The Avengers weren't saving the universe. They were unknowingly clearing the board for Doom, removing threats, weakening defenses, building the path. Thanos? Gone. Ultron? Destroyed. Loki? manipulated into compliance. Even Steve Rogers, the moral compass, was removed from the board. Piece by piece, Doom's obstacles vanished, until only the path forward remained. And when you view it this way, Doctor Strange's cryptic behavior suddenly makes sense. The hesitation, the secrets, the refusal to explain his plan. Strange wasn't vague because he didn't know. He was vague because he couldn't bear to tell them the truth. That their victory was not their own. That their sacrifice was just fuel for Doom's ascension. Now, let's consider Kang's role one last time, because this is where Act 3 reveals its full twist. Kang believed he was the master of time. He believed the TVA kept him safe, that his pruning kept order. But Kang made one fatal mistake. He underestimated Tony Stark. Because Tony was never just a genius. He was never just a man in a suit. He was a futurist. He saw farther ahead than anyone else. He built safeguards upon safeguards, contingencies within contingencies. And when Kang thought he was grooming a successor, what he was really doing was arming his executioner. Doom doesn't just kill Kang. He absorbs him. He takes the TVA's tech, its authority, its reach, and folds it into his arsenal. The pruning sticks, the reset charges, the time doors, all of it becomes Doom's. And with it, he doesn't just rule one timeline. He rules them all. This is why Loki's throne, the one Kang once sat upon, becomes irrelevant. Doom doesn't need a throne. Doom is the throne. Wherever he stands, reality bends. And here's the final horror. Doctor Strange's 14 million wasn't just a lie. It was a mercy. Because if he had told Stark what he truly saw, if he had revealed that every path led to Doom, then Tony might have rejected it. But by showing him only fragments, Strange gave Tony the illusion of choice. And Tony, being Tony, walked straight into his destiny. Now we arrive at the climax. Doom has his living gauntlet. He has the TVA's tech. He has the throne of time itself. What does he do? He doesn't destroy the multiverse. He doesn't balance it. He doesn't cage it. He rewrites it. Imagine this. A multiverse where every universe, every branch, every possibility reflects Doom's face. An infinite hall of mirrors, each one showing a different version of the same man. A multiverse not of diversity, but of singularity. Doom eternal. Doom unbroken. Doom inevitable. And what about the heroes? What about the Avengers? They don't die. That would be merciful. Instead, they are rewritten into roles of Doom's choosing. Strange becomes his chronicler, the man who saw but could not change. Wanda becomes his architect, shaping realities in his image. Loki becomes his jester, mocking and entertaining but never rebelling. America. Chavez becomes his key, locked into service, opening doors she cannot close. Even Galactus, devourer of worlds, becomes his eternal engine, feeding the hunger of a multiverse that now belongs to Doom. This is the ultimate tragedy. The heroes we loved, the sacrifices we mourned, were never victories. They were stepping stones, not to salvation, but to Doom. And here's where the theory lands its hardest punch. Doom is not just a villain waiting in the wings. He is the culmination of everything we've seen. Every snap, every spell, every death, every lie. The entire Infinity Saga wasn't about defeating Thanos. It was about crowning Doom. So when Strange whispered, "We're in the Endgame now," maybe we misunderstood. Maybe Endgame wasn't the end at all. Maybe it was the beginning of Doom's game. And that's the story this theory leaves us with. Not a tale of heroes saving the day, but of destiny bending, twisting, and reshaping until the only truth left is the mask. Doom's mask. Because in the end, it was never about whether Doom was coming. It was about whether we would ever realize that Doom was here all along. And that's where this theory ends, with the chilling realization that Tony Stark's greatest legacy wasn't the armor, wasn't the Avengers, wasn't even the snap. His legacy was Doom. If this breakdown gripped you, if you got chills picturing the Avengers as pawns in Doom's eternal rise, then you know what to do. Hit like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves Marvel theories as much as you do. And if you want to go the extra mile and directly support us so we can keep building stories like this, hit that super thanks button and drop $25. It helps us keep the lights on, dive deeper, and bring you more theories that unfold like this one. Because the truth is, the multiverse is full of stories. But here, we make sure you hear the ones that matter.